Okay, y'all. So today we are going to talk about some lost history. So let's read, shall we? We say that the case, First National Bank of Montgomery, Minnesota versus Jerome Daly, 1968, known as the Credit River decision, established res judicata instead decisis in all similar cases, and did so by jury decision in the Superior Court of the People, which no inferior court or jurisdiction has authority to overturn or review America. This is important because a jury decision in public court stands over any decision by corporate administrative tribunals, which are expected to act in conformance with public law. We say the Jerome Daly case proved that the Federal Reserve banks and other lender institutions organized under their system never gives anything of equitable value in exchange for the promissory notes and mortgage contracts that they obtain. This is important because when such a determination is made by a jury, it stands as fact. We say that Jerome Daly forced the bank manager to admit under cross-examination that the bank created the funds it loaned to Jerome Daly out of thin air simply by entering numbers in a ledger and banks. This is important because it demonstrates the basic fraud simply by entering numbers in a ledger, and that credit is based on the borrower's own assets, not the bank's. The bank loans nothing of value of his own. We say that the bank manager in the Daly case also admitted that this was the practice throughout the Federal Reserve System. This is important because virtually all banks in this country are members of the Federal Reserve System. We say that there is no excuse whatsoever for any foreclosure action that has been taken in America since 1968 in favor of the banks. And lender institutions operate under the Federal Reserve System, nor any successor system operate under the same principles. This is important because the Daly case proved that no equitable consideration was given by the banks and no valid contract ever existed as a result. We say that the U.S. Small Business Administration that obtained the promissory note and mortgage contract in case number, here's the case number, people, in case y'all want to look this case up and read it for yourself, 3AN-12-6858CI, and the Superior District Court for the state of Alaska was operating as part of Federal Reserve System and using the same exact procedures as the First National Bank of Montgomery, Minnesota, and the Daly case. This is important because the Daly case was already decided and there was no obligation to prove the same facts again. We say as the only sworn witness having first-hand knowledge of the fact that no actual cash ever traded hands in the transaction discussed throughout case number, and that the U.S. Small Business Administration received our promissory notes without disclosure of its value, without disclosing its own status as a false storefront for undisclosed banking interests. This is important because the bank knowingly misrepresented itself as a government institution offering a federal disaster loan, obscured both its nature and identity. We say that the undisclosed to us, our promissory note had actual cash value equal to the entire amount of the purported loan and was redeemable for cash at any United States Treasury window. This is important because it established a motive for the bank's deceit. They were able to obtain funds equal to the entire amount of the loan from us without our knowledge. This enabled them to deposit our own funds in a bank account and write a check off those funds back to us, thus creating the illusion that they gave us a loan of their own assets. We say that other than providing the only actual assets which underwrote the entire transaction, we received nothing but peonage from the bank and the state in exchange. This is important because if we had acted as employees of the state or the bank, they would have had to pay us for our own services as builders and caretakers of their property. They will also be responsible for paying any taxes or other fees. This is important because their failure to pay us and failure to pay the taxes owed provides prima facie evidence that they were never the owners of the property. We say that more than 40 years after the Daly case established fraudulent mortgage loans, this same fraud is occurring every day throughout America. Additional information and publication obtained from the Federal Reserve Banks themselves has confirmed that the same practice that led to the Credit River decision are ongoing today. This is important because it proves that ongoing systemic fraud and usury is being practiced by banking institutions throughout America, and far from addressing the crime, the Bar Association, law enforcement agencies, administrative courts are aiding and abetting it. We say that as a result of this fraud and racketeering, we have suffered extortion, underarmed force, and the loss of over 228,000 USD in private credit, and an estimated, and you can see that USD in actual private property loss and uses deprivation, and have been evicted from our home by armed commercial mercenaries masquerading as police officers. This is important because millions of people are suffering the same way and for the same reason. Private corporate tribunals acting in conflict of interest and pretending to be public courts, executive administrators acting as executives, dissentient and claiming to have judicial power, banks loaning the borrower's own assets to them, armed commercial mercenaries pretending to be policemen. We see that on 17 November 2014, armed mercenaries wearing uniforms impersonating actual police officers but instead representing the state of Alaska corporation trespassed upon our posted private property and physically evicted us from our land on the basis of orders from a judge employed to act for the same. Describe. This is important because this gives us standing as injured parties and witnesses directly and physically harmed by this fraud and violent racketeering. We say that the man who trespassed upon our private property to evict us was wearing a state of Alaska trooper uniform and carrying a sidearm. He was fully informed that he was trespassing and that neither he nor the judge nor the court issuing such orders had any right, jurisdiction, or authority to be present in our land or to address us about any matter at all, and that he was committing a grand felony level property crime as well as capital crime of inland piracy. This is important because he was fully informed and warned. We say that he pleaded the Nuremberg defense and stated that he was just following orders and didn't know anything but the words on the paper in front of him that was signed by a judge. This is important because it is a prima facie evidence that the people enforcing this fraud are being misled about the nature and authority of these so-called judges who are private corporate employees and not public officials at all. We say that we questioned this man and asked if he knew the difference between the state of Alaska trooper and the Alaska state trooper, and if he realized that he was functioning as a commercial mercenary and not as a police officer. He shrugged and appeared helpless. This is important because it is prima facie evidence that this man didn't know and was being informed of his lack of authority by his employers, which resulted in him unknowingly undertaking criminal acts of trespass, grand felony, armed theft, inland piracy, and assault. We say that we would have been well within our rights to shoot this man and those who accompanied him in defense of our own lives and property, but we realized that he and his companions were ignorant and deliberately misinformed and had no idea that they were acting as criminals and in behalf of criminal syndicates. This is important because there are a great many of people who might, under similar circumstances of criminal assault, fire upon armed trespassers acting as commercial mercenaries, and they would be justified in doing so. We say that the circumstances in these conditions are a direct result of criminal usurpation against our lawful government carried out by incorporated banking institutions and governmental services. Corporations that have no right to exist when they are operated as crime syndicates. This is important because foreign governments have chartered these corporations and allowed them to run amok on American soil. Trying to make sure y'all see all this, but don't want to read y'all the whole thing. But this is a good book, and as you can see so far, it got case laws in here, and it gives you the whole rundown of all the fraudulent things that is going on still in this world today, as you can see. I'm gonna put it on here in case y'all want to finish reading it. But yeah, there you have it, people. The fraud continues still to this day. Peace.